This is the Filmcast review of Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. I'm going to read the plot summary from IMDb. Archaeologist Indiana Jones races against time to retrieve a legendary artifact that can change the course of history. End quote. As I mentioned on the main show, which you can find at thefilmcast.com, we are now 15 years into doing the Filmcast podcast, and on our very first episode, we reviewed Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. I recently revisited that film, and I still found it to be pretty disappointing. It's not great, but even Steven Spielberg making some of his worst movies, there's still a bunch of nice little moments, a bunch of nice filmmaking flourishes that you can pull out of a movie like Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, especially because, again, like, one of the greatest filmmakers of all time, not working with great material, but like there's some inherent value in that, and also one of the most beloved characters of all time. I am curious, before we get into Dial of Destiny, Devindra and Jeff, like, has your feelings on Crystal Skull changed over time? Because if I recall, they're pretty negative when we started watching that movie 15 years ago, right?
I meant to both revisit our review and also rewatch Crystal Skull. I just did not have time for it. But it is weird that publicly there are a lot of people saying like, "Oh yeah, Crystal Skull holds up better than we remember." So I think that part of the pop culture reckoning is happening.
I rewatched it recently, and I do not think so. I mean, there's so many problems.
I was just so uninterested.
There's so many problems with that film on a very fundamental script level. Like, I'll just give you a few examples. The Ray Winstone's character shows up at the beginning, like the first 10 minutes of the movie, and then within 10 minutes after that, he's betrayed Indiana Jones. And it's like, I barely cared about this relationship, and now you expect me to be shocked that he's... And then he then re-betrays the Russians later on in the film. Anyway, it's his character arc makes absolutely no sense. You really need to be invested in the Indiana Jones Marion Ravenwood relationship, I think, for that movie to work, to be firing on all cylinders for you. There is a lot of CG that is very obvious. Shia LaBeouf swings from vines with monkeys. Movie, none of those things aged well, in my opinion.
They didn't start well.
They didn't start well, and people again. Steven Spielberg is amazing, and there are a handful of scenes and moments where I'm like, "That's really cool that he did that." But overall, it's not a great film. Jeff Kanata, your thoughts on Crystal Skull over time?
I hovered over the play button on this numerous times over the last several weeks, going, "You got to do it. You got to
can I do it?"
And I just couldn't bring myself to do it.
Wow,
you're like what's his face, Han Solo's son in The Force Awakens. It's like, I know what must be done. I can't bring myself to do it.
I have not seen it in many years, and I'm not encouraged to see it. But based on what you said, having revisited it. There are a few movies that have broken my heart like that movie.
So, into that breach steps Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, right? Like, and the question is this, for me, I was walking into this thinking, is this a better film than Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull? Secondary question, is it a better ending for the Indiana Jones character than that movie was? Devindra Hardar, what do you think? Do you think this movie is better than Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull?
Based on what I remember of Crystal Skull, absolutely. I think this movie is actually pretty good, and it's kind of tough because it's also tough. Like, I went into this like expecting kind of a disaster because the early Cannes reviews were just like, "This is garbage. There's nothing of value here." And what I see is a movie that actually tries to reckon with the character, in our memories of the character, with fun set pieces that don't look as good as Steven Spielberg's set pieces, but really who does it that well? Like, like maybe J.J. Abrams sometimes at the height of his powers. I really love James Mangold. I love James Mangold as an action filmmaker and as a genre filmmaker, and I think he always makes very interesting movies. And to see him give basically that touch to this, there's a big train set piece that is both a nod to Indiana Jones and also kind of reminds me of the Wolverine, because he has a really cool train set piece on that movie. I think this movie is just a lot of fun overall. Like, it gives me what I want from an Indiana Jones movie. It has some great chases, some great action sequences that are still I can still understand what's going on. They're shot in a different way than we're used to from classic indie, but I think they're still really fun. He gets some really great quips, like classic Indiana Jones quips. Like there was one, Subway was faster, where I was just like clapped because I like that whole sequence. And I also like where it ends up. So this has the energy of a good Indiana Jones movie, and I also think it has the energy of, it's a story about a character we are all so familiar with, who was like the peak swashbuckler of the 80s, basically. Like such a cool character, such a cool guy, had a lot of problems. Was it the Marion relationship that was statutory rape involved there or something? Like there's a lot of things about him as a guy who's kind of scummy, because he was our hero, but he was also like didn't mind cheating if he had to, right? Didn't mind shooting the swordsman because that was the thing to do. He was a little more vulnerable than a lot of other heroes. And I think like this gets at that. This also gets at the aging hero and the cost of like living that life, and also the legacy that you leave behind. Compare this movie to The Flash, which gives us Michael Keaton's Batman flipping around like a 20-year-old, and I still hate it. I'm still so angry thinking about how little that movie even reckoned with the fact that okay, fine, he can move really well. Is there anything about his age, anything about his regrets, anything about his life as Batman that he really wanted to fix? And it just didn't seem like that movie was willing to engage with any of that. Whereas this movie is all of that. And I think that's interesting.
Okay, let's
yeah.
That
Sure.
to quote Richie on The Bear, that's a bit much. What I mean by that is yes, you're right. I think this movie does a much better job at reckoning with Indiana Jones's age at this point in life than The Flash did for Michael Keaton.
Sure.
Absolutely. No argument. But they still had young people put on a literal Harrison Ford old guy mask to pretend to be Indiana Jones in this movie, right? Like
I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I actually think it looked pretty good. Because I was both dreading the de-aging face and
No. But my point,
Yeah,
I think like for both young and
I got news for you.
Indiana Jones. Yeah.
People put on Harrison Ford hair and hats in all of the Indiana Jones movies.
in all of them.
Okay, that's fair. I'm just saying he's like a fairly spry 80-year-old in the movie. That's all I'm saying. Okay,
He's a pretty spry. He is not flipping. He is not doing freaking double jumps and Batman flips and things that did not exist in the previous movies. Like he doesn't move like he did in before.
Right,
he moves slower. He's still.
Whereas in the Flash, like Michael Keaton was doing stuff he didn't even do in the Tim Burton.
Didn't even do in the
80s. Okay, fair enough.
But anyway, there was a shirtless scene in this movie with Harrison Ford. It was like both kind of having us confront his age, but also like, man, he's still pretty ripped for like an 80-something-year-old dude. That was like
impossibly ripped,
just impossible. Just like kind of both a flex and both a reminder that he's aging. I think it's interesting where this movie is set. It's set in 1969 when we're sort of like he's waking up and like they're celebrating the moon landing and the astronauts are in town. It's also fascinating that this has been a series about the past, right? And he's a guy.
He's confronting irrelevance.
Yeah, he's literally confronting irrelevance because like he is all about the past. He's all about archaeology, and now we're leaping into the future, into the modern age, and Indiana Jones doesn't know what he's doing. I like thematically where this movie is. I like a lot of the characters. What's her face? I do like the Fleabag girl and her
Phoebe Waller-Bridge.
Phoebe Waller-Bridge is. I think she's a lot of fun, and she has both the energy of young Indiana Jones and also like the good and bad of him. I like a lot of the set, like there are several set pieces here that are a lot of fun. I don't like how it treats some of the characters, and we'll talk about some of that in spoilers. Like Antonio Banderas is in this movie. You would not know it, if you were not prepared for it or realize that, oh, this guy looks like a slightly older Antonio Banderas. No, he's in this movie. There are things like that I don't think work out so well, but I do like the fact that this is like a bold movie that takes some crazy swings towards the end, and it totally commits to it, and it's true to the characters. And I think what a lot of people forget is that we all love Raiders. Raiders of the Lost Ark is one of the best movies ever made. One of the best movies of all time. Temple of Doom, maybe not so much. Raiders of the Lost Ark, maybe not so much. But in our collective memory, we kind of think of like that original trilogy as like, oh, perfect, pristine, and we kind of forget the criticisms of it or of those sequels. Nothing is as good as Raiders. That's the ultimate conclusion. I think this is just a really interesting look at getting us like, kind of close, or at least back to the vibes of the original trilogy. Like I'll tell you, like the Temple of Doom, there's so many things I like about that movie. That's also the movie that made me realize, man, people just can be kind of racist around Indians, huh? That's me. That's me. There's that, and Last Crusade I think is just really, really, it's goofy. It's a goofy movie. It's a fun time. It's kind of goofy and kind of silly. Whereas I still think like you could look at Raiders today and be like, I have no notes on this movie. So that's the other thing. Like maybe I don't hold the original overall trilogy in as much regard as other people.
Yeah.
But
I don't know.
I think this one gets there.
Something, it's now making me feel like, oh, maybe we should have done like a rewatch of the original trilogy.
I was kind of feeling that, but we didn't really have time.
Yeah. I feel bad about that now, but just a few things I want to point out. One of the things about Raiders is Indiana Jones as a character is like constantly messing up in that movie.
Yes,
like he has virtually no bearing on the result of the plot of Raiders. And I thought this is kind of an interesting approach to take to the character. He's almost like a passive observer. But yeah, I mean, I love Raiders as well. I honestly think Last Crusade is my favorite one though, because
nearly perfect.
I think it's amazing. Like you have the Sean Connery, Harrison Ford interactions, amazing
incredible
set pieces.
Set pieces.
Yeah, like
Raiders.
The tank set piece. Obviously, this big confrontation at the end you chose poorly, etc. But also like this idea that I think is present in all the Indiana Jones films, or most of them, that like there's something valuable about trying to understand the past. Like there's something inherently valuable about reaching for understanding at a point when capitalists are just charging in and trying to extract as much money out of it, or using the past for their own ends in some way. And in my mind, Indiana Jones has always stood for like understanding. And I do think that's carried out a little bit here. But anyway, these are just some ways in which I think the original trilogy has informed the character and my perception of him. But Jeff Kanata, I'm so curious. What did you think of Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny?
Well, Dave, I guess you could say what I think of Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny is best summed up in the form of a limerick. Not all my fears were assuaged, but nostalgia was surely engaged. And by the end, I could pretend for a moment I'd been de-aged.
Ooh.
Nice. One of my favorite things about the Jeff limericks is predicting what that last rhyme is going to be. A lot of joy in that for me. But yes.
This movie, I agree a lot with what Devindra said. I walked out of it with tears on my face, feeling like I had a good time at the movie theater. Throughout the movie, I wouldn't have said that. I don't think that was a consistent feeling, but I think the third act of this movie redeemed it for me. I think it's going to be a very divisive third act for people, but I loved where the movie went in the third act. And obviously we'll get to that in spoilers. My biggest criticism, honestly, and this is where I differ from Devindra, is I don't think the action set pieces were that good. I don't think there's a...
completely agreed. Completely agreed.
It was hugely disappointing, actually, that for 2/3 of the movie, I was like, boy, I don't think there's a single set piece moment that I'm going to take away from this and be like, yeah, there's no giant ball rolling down the thing. There's no in the
horse on the subway.
Yeah. I mean, the whole point, the whole cool thing about that is like we take a horse into the subway. Like it's not very exciting. It wasn't very exciting to me. And that is a major strike against this movie, in my opinion. Like at the bare minimum, regardless of the age of your main character, you have to have an inventive, fun, surprising Indiana Jones set piece. And the train sequence you referenced is fun, but there's no like transcendent moment. There's no iconic, I'm going to have that image in my head forever moment. I will also say, I hope this isn't a spoiler. I think there's a lot of it in the trailer. There is a much more de-aged Harrison Ford in this than I thought there was going to be. There's a sequence at the beginning of the movie that I kept going, well, this isn't going to end, right? This is going to end, right? This is going to end. And it kept going and going and going.
The whole first act, basically. Yeah.
I'm going to say something pretty controversial. I would have been fine if the whole movie was that.
Oh,
I really would have been fine. I really would have been fine if we had just seen a de-aged Indiana Jones movie. I think that would have been okay. That's not a review of this movie. I'm just saying, I think what I'm saying is that the effect, while I was always conscious that it was happening, was so well executed. And I thought, I could do a movie of this.
This is the best de-aging we've ever seen.
And the most
I think straight up.
I think there's more of it in this movie than we perhaps ever seen. And it's not just Harrison who's de-aged. Anyway, I know Dave's chomping at the bit.
Dave is going through all his emotions.
I'm in agonizing pain right now, but I will let you finish, Jeff.
That's a completely separate issue and maybe a different podcast and even to talk about. But I can't wait to talk about the ending with this movie, because the ending of this movie made the whole movie for me. And I think that, I think that Mangold is trying to channel Spielberg throughout this whole thing. Like, you see shots and you're like, he's really trying to pull a Spielberg here. And I don't think that the movie always works. I think it has giant missteps. I think there are characters that don't even need to be in the movie. There are things that happen that are built up to be exciting and then just completely land with like a lead balloon. It doesn't work on a number of levels. I read our friend Walter Chaw's scathing indictment of this movie, and I had a hard time disagreeing with any of the points he made. I just was able to forgive much more of this movie because by the end, I was crying. I was watching Indiana Jones again. And that meant something to me after feeling like I wasn't in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Now, the question you started this whole thing with, Dave, is like, was it worth bringing it back? Did this movie have a better send-off? The problem with that sentence is there is no way to make a better send-off than The Last Crusade had. It's the perfect book closing to this character. I mean, it is pitch perfect. Them riding off into the sunset together. I named the dog Indiana. It could not be improved upon. Crystal Skull certainly didn't do it. And I think this movie improves upon Crystal Skull. And there's a lovely denouement in this movie that worked for me, and we'll get to it. But the problem inherently is, like, I do think that first trilogy of movies is hallowed ground for me. And especially that ending of the character literally riding off into the sunset with his father. Like, that, I mean, it makes me emotional just thinking about it. But I do think that this movie has some interesting things to say about aging and about, Devindra mentioned all of it. This aging hero and the place in the world as you get older. I think there's something interesting to be said about that. But I kind of also think Last Crusade said that. Like, they had the Sean Connery character kind of fit that role as well. So I don't think this movie's redundant. I don't think I'm so conflicted about it because I ultimately had a good time with this movie, but I don't think it's good enough to redeem Crystal Skulls and to redeem the fact that we made more beyond 3.
Well, I think we have a lot to talk about in spoilers. I will just say I'm probably the least positive out of the three of us. And this is a movie where I have become more negative on it as I've gone further and further away from it. When I was watching the movie, I was actually impressed at the audacity of a lot of the movie, which we'll talk about, right? But as I've had more time on it, I've become more and more negative, and I disagree with a lot of the stuff that you guys have said. One of the things is de-aged Harrison Ford. I never for a moment was convinced by it. I actually think he's. I recently watched Captain Marvel for Secret Invasion. That is a better de-aged Samuel L. Jackson, in my opinion, than this one of Harrison Ford. And also, they used Harrison Ford's today's voice without trying to de-age that.
He sounds
so
older.
We literally, I've demonstrated on this podcast, we literally have the technology to like convincingly recreate someone's voice. I don't know why they didn't go with younger voice for the younger Harrison.
I disagree with that, though. I think you have the actor, let him play the part. Just let him play the part. His voice is
Yeah,
going
you
to
could. Well, yeah, you could have, but you could have done
like a
something
subtle
to it to
effect
make
or
it
something.
I think
sound better.
that's more Uncanny Valley. But go ahead.
Yeah, fair. I kind of agree with Jeff that there's been a lot of talk by James Mangold, the director of this movie. Like, I want nothing to do with the volume. We're using practical stuff only, and I think most of the movie looks bad, in my opinion. Like, I think a lot of it looks like it was shot on green screen, or like when there's a chase sequence in the movie. Like the wide shots. Oh, those are pretty good, and then cut to Harrison Ford and clearly like an obvious green screen in the background. That's how the movies have been since the beginning of time. So I'm not saying like that's anything
that's how
new.
you safely shoot driving shots,
right? Exactly. But I'm just saying like, you can't go out and like talk about how like we did everything practically and like massive sequences in the movie look like they were all done on computers instead, and not particularly good looking CG in my opinion. So that's a huge problem with the movie for me as well. I also think the script is a mess. Like, it brings up a lot of these issues that you guys are talking about with Indiana Jones being old, and like that's good. Harrison Ford is introduced in 1969 as like confronting irrelevance, retiring.
I love the redoing the lecture hall scene and just being the exact opposite.
That's all great. That's like I'm cool with that, and like starting that character at a lower place. Like I have no problem with any of that. But I think the character of Helena, while really wonderfully played by Phoebe Waller-Bridge, has barely an arc. Like, they're supposed to have a really big arc, and they don't really have it that I can see on screen. There are way too many side characters that feel like they had their subplots just completely cut from the film. Boyd Holbrook plays a character named Kleber in this movie. Like,
Boyd Holbrook in a movie from this director? Shocking. Playing a scummy cowboy-esque character?
I am a huge Boyd Holbrook fan. Like, I think he's a brilliant actor. I love his presence whenever he shows up. And it feels like
he's playing the Boyd Holbrook character.
Why was that character necessary in this? Like, it's just there's no reason for that character.
I don't understand. We'll talk about that in spoilers, but I still don't understand the team because Mads Mikkelsen's villain has like a bunch of henchmen. And
it feels like there was like 30 minutes that got cut out of this movie, explaining who these people were and what was going on. So I think the script is a mess. It didn't look that great, but at the end of the day, I think you guys are right. This is better as a film than if you ask me to like choose a movie to watch, I would still choose this one over Crystal Skull. It's a better movie than Crystal Skull, but also, and this will be the last I say about it before we get to spoilers, I think Crystal Skull handled the ending of Indiana Jones as a character better than this movie. At the end of Crystal Skull, he walks off into the distance with his new wife that he met from Indiana Jones Raiders of the Lost Ark, and his son is trying to take over by putting on his hat, but he's like, nope, I don't think so, and that's the end of Crystal Skull. And so that Crystal Skull, not a good movie, but that was a decent ending for that character. And I wasn't a fan of where they took it in this movie. I'll just put it that way.
I want to address that specifically in spoilers because I really disagree. But
okay, cool. Let's do it. So those are some thoughts. Oh, we should also say, of course, wonderful to get John Williams back in the composer chair. Like, he still can bring it.
You're playing Minority Report. And you're playing bits of the Attack of the Clones soundtrack from what I'm hearing here. But yeah.
Well, the dude is what, 91 years old. He can borrow from himself a little bit.
He can.
I'm okay with it.
It's just funny. It's like, I remember these drum beats. Yeah. This all feels familiar. Yeah.
It's just a blessing to be able to get a John Williams score, even at his age of 91 years old.
To have that theme and the power of that theme is just so...
Thank you. It's a incredible gift. It's a gift, and so I can't deny that. All right. So much more to discuss. Spoilers for Indiana Jones: The Dial of Destiny starting right now. One thing I like about Dial of Destiny is James Mangold kind of does a good job of honoring the template of Indiana Jones films.
Yeah.
Every Indiana Jones film has the discovery of some kind of artifact of some kind. And then at the end of the film, or towards the end of the film, the artifact is activated somehow, right? Yeah. Like something happens with the artifact. That happens with every
little supernatural.
Yeah.
It's not normal. Yeah.
And so every single Indiana Jones film has that, and this movie kind of follows that template, and I think it does great honor to that. So like, no complaints with that. But we have to talk about the ending of the movie, right? Which is that the Dial of Destiny takes the characters back in time to around 200 BC towards the siege of Syracuse by the Romans. And it turns out Archimedes has programmed the dial to send people back in time, because in the real life siege of Syracuse, Archimedes was slain during the siege of Syracuse. And so he needed as much help as possible. And Jeff, you had alluded very artfully and vaguely when you had seen the movie before any of us, and you'd said, "Wow, I think it's really going to be polarizing." And when I saw this happen, I was like, "I know what Jeff Canada's talking about now." It's a bold, big.
That's what I loved about it,
and yeah, and I really appreciated that. One of my favorite moments from that sequence was there's like freaking harpoons going into the air, and one of the harpoons goes into the ship. Or into the plane that they're on, and Harrison Ford like looks at it and he just like reaches out and touches it, like with curiosity. His reaction is not, "Oh my gosh, there's a harpoon in the ship." It's like, "I need to see what this is about."
Yeah.
Like, this is fascinating, and that was just such a beautiful little character moment for Indiana Jones.
It's
so I
it's
yeah,
also the only time in the film, that sequence, where I had that feeling of watching an Indiana Jones movie. Of I've watching something I have never seen before. Wow. Anything is possible right now. What, it's a horse fighting a tank in Last Crusade, right? Yeah. It's a guy going underneath a Jeep. The movie does not reach that height until that moment when you go, we are in completely uncharted territory right now. This movie is going for it. I don't know what's going to happen next. I'm completely on the edge of my seat. And that to me is what made it so magical. And then, I mean, I don't mean to skip ahead here, but I absolutely adore what it does with creating these dual endings for Indy and saying Indiana Jones himself wants to stay in the past. He wants to stay in the past. And he's, leave me here. This is what I want. This is what I've always wanted. I have this opportunity. And I thought, this is an amazing ending for Indy. Like, he achieved the thing. He did it. He's actually won with the history. He's become ingrained in the thing that he loves. And then the movie goes, nope. We have a different idea for it. And I was like, oh, beautiful. That is the kind of, you disagree.
Well, if the movie had ended, I just wanted to agree with you. I want you to express your opinion, but if the movie had ended there with Indy in the past, I would have been like, this justifies bringing Indiana Jones back. Like, this is it. This is the reason they brought him back. So, like, this is the ending he could have. And I would have felt like, okay, bold decision. I don't know if I would have done that, but like, at the very least, I'm like, it makes sense why they wanted to do this. Why they wanted to make this film and bring this character out of retirement one last time. I would have been totally fine with that. Okay,
but
go ahead, Jeff.
I agree.
You love the actual.
I agree. Yeah. I had that moment of like, this is genius. This is a genius swing.
I had that moment too,
And then when they take it away from me, I went, oh, that rug pull and actually bringing him back. And then you realize what the movie is saying is, no, people are more important. People are more important. And that just lovely scene of Marion walking through the door, him changing just very subtly changing the magnet on the refrigerator. Like the two of them, the really beautifully acted, sweet scene between the two of them. I was crying. And I went, this movie had its cake and it ate it too. It gave me both of those endings in my mind. And I loved it. I thought it was so perfect.
I was kind of like along the same path too. I was like, it would be pretty ballsy just to leave him in the past. But then I thought to myself, has anything actually grown here? Like, is this Indy actually a different person psychologically than the guy we met in Raiders or the guy we knew in Temple of Doom, which was even before Raiders, right? So it's like, Indy is not a perfect guy and not always a good guy. And I feel like leaving him in the past would be like, that's a great way to wrap him up as a story. Does not actually show any growth. Does not actually show any maturation
completely
as a person.
Completely fine, yeah. But
I think the follow-up.
It sounds like you like the ending.
Is smarter.
Okay,
yeah.
Let me weigh in, Jeff. So thank you. I think I've given you a chance to express it, right? So I think I am not opposed to the concept that you described, which is, yes, people are more important. Relationships are more important. You can't stay in the past.
Right.
You need to be in the present, right? That's a great idea in concept. I don't feel the film supports that. First of all, Indy doesn't make the decision. Like, he gets punched out and then brought back to the present against his will. That sucks. That sucks. Like, it sucks that like the literally most important decision in his life is taken, or the end of his life is taken out of his hands. I'm not a fan of that at all.
He was leaving himself to die there, by the way, just to be clear, because he had a gunshot wound. So that's certain death. It's not like he would live a happy life.
Sure. No, fair, accurate. But I just don't like that he didn't make the choice. So it'd be one thing if he like had the chance to decide, and then he's like, wait, no, Marion, blah blah blah, Sala, all the people, I need to go back. You know, like then that would have been like, okay, like I can but he gets punched out, and who does he get punched out by? Helena, who, by the way, for 80% of the movie is like, I just want this stuff for the money. You know, like I don't even care about any of this. Has a complete 180 transformation.
Why do you
in the
think
last,
that
like,
would
30
be?
minutes. You tell
because
me.
you went back in
Indy...
freaking time. Like that.
Yeah. She's never seen the magic.
Her transformation already happened before that point, though.
Well, it was like the kid got kidnapped.
It happened when Harrison Ford got shot, and like, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, I care about him now." You know, like I just feel like that character's arc was ill-served. He was ill-served by the film. So
Indy points out, like, you're not a heartless capitalist if you save this kid, you know, from the street and keep him going and keep him fed, because we see throughout the movie she's taking care of this kid. He's not in school or anything, but he has food.
It's a fair point.
He's with her.
It's a fair point, Devindra. It did, the arc of that character from what she was at the beginning to what she was at the end did not work for me. I'm glad it worked for you.
It could have been smoother.
I'm glad it worked for you, but like it didn't work for me. And as a result, it's like it didn't have its cake and eat it too. It had its cake and then it ruined the cake. And it didn't, and it ate the rotten cake or whatever the analogy is.
By basically, it feels like he's more saved by somebody who was another version of him. You know, a version of him that went more capitalist, right? It wasn't about saving history, but he had those elements of her personality, and that is kind of fascinating to see.
Yeah, I mean, she is kind of positioned in some ways as like almost a successor to Indiana Jones, which I wouldn't necessarily be opposed to. I just feel like the movie didn't do a good job of, you know, again, that's me. I mean,
I agree.
It worked. The sudden heel turn for her worked for you, Jeff. It sounds like, and that's fine.
Were you not moved by where does it hurt here?
Mm-hmm.
Crushed me.
It didn't. It was fine. You know, I think at the end of the day. So you disagreed with my comments about how like Crystal Skull was a great place to end that character. Did you want to elaborate on that a little bit? Because for me, this ending brings us basically back to where we were at the end of Crystal Skull again.
I like the fact that this movie, for the most part, wants to ignore that Crystal Skulls exists.
Well, except for Mutt, who is very important.
Yeah, except for Mutt,
a movie about grief.
Yeah. I know it is a movie about grief, but it's like we're killing that whole movie is what we're doing.
I think that the way that this movie handles the Indy Marion relationship is much better. It's like much more poignant and moving to me than how it was handled in Crystal Skull. A lot of which is just like, hey, a bunch of stuff happened. Well, you know, in the time that's, you know, and like it's very flip. I felt in Crystal Skull, whereas here it's like given a lot of, because Mutt dies, it's given a lot of gravitas. So I did appreciate that. But
the best thing Mutt Williams ever did was die.
Yeah, I mean, you don't even have to have any notion that you had ever seen that character to have everything work in this movie. You don't have to have any association with Shia LaBeouf or have seen Crystal Skull for any of that to work. It works in this movie, independent of that character having any cinematic presence.
Right.
You know,
I mean, you do need to know that they got married at the end of the last one, but you know, for me,
it's all covered.
I think it'd be a little confusing if you watch Last Crusade and they just went straight to this. That's all I'm saying. Okay. To me, it's just like we got back to Indy and Marion being together, and like Indy realizing that he needed Marion, which by the way was not a proactive decision he made. And that's basically like where we were at the end of Crystal Skull. So like, what was the point of all that? If you had him stay in the past, it would have been like completely justifies this movie. Like, it's like, wow, amazing decision. Not necessarily one I would have made, but like great choice. Like, I get why you needed to bring this character back. Now I'm like, what was the point of all that? That's kind of
You
my
just
reaction.
got through praising Raiders for being a movie about a passive observer who doesn't.
That's not even what I'm complaining about in this film. I'm not complaining about, and he is a passive. By the way, he is super passive in this movie. That's not a problem with
Right.
me. Like he's largely like following Helena
Right.
around, basically. Like Helena's the. I don't have a problem with that. My problem is, where do we leave the character?
Yeah.
At the
Well,
end
we
of the
leave
film,
him. We leave him reconciling with his
Yes.
grief. Also coming back together with his wife, because who knows what's like. She couldn't rely on him to deal with the death of Mutt, but also maybe he was not emotionally mature enough to like deal with this at all too. Like we leave him as a more complete person than we did at the end of
Well
Crystal
said.
Skull. And I think that's
like
Alright.
there's a happiness
Yeah.
to him
Yeah.
that felt to me earned, and I, as an audience member who has spent 40 years of my life with this character, I was emotional about Indy. He didn't abandon his present. He didn't just find solace in the past. He didn't just die, on the battlefield in 200 BC. He came back and he found some happiness amidst all of this pain. And that was important to me. I didn't know it was going to be, but it turned out to be. And I thought that was the beautiful thing, is I would have been applauding at the he stayed in the past ending. And then it gave me the ending I didn't know I needed. That's what I was, that's where the cake and eat it too comment came from.
I'm so glad. Like, I am genuinely glad it worked for you. Like, it sounds like you had a powerful experience, and I don't want to like negate that in any way. At the same time, all the stuff you said, it's like you could append a prefix to the beginning of each sentence of saying like, he was forced to go back to the future. He was forced to do X, Y, Z.
I totally understand your complaint in that regard. I totally understand you wanting that to be a more active choice. It just didn't bother me that he was forced into it. Like I don't know. I can't even really explain why, but it didn't bother me because he got there, right? And I kind of love the Helena character punching him out, and she did a very indie thing to do, right? There was something that worked about that, but I also 100% understand your problem with it not being an active choice on his part.
Yeah. Let's talk about some of the other elements of the movie that we didn't get to during the main review. I was the opening like train chase sequence. I thought didn't look. I was baffled that they chose to use unconvincing for me de-aging technology in a night scene on top of like a largely CG train as a way to like open the film. None of that worked for me, but it sounds like you guys enjoyed it a lot more. Like, what do you guys think of the opening scene with de-aged Indy?
I mean,
go ahead,
that's
Devindra.
it's in the trailer. So like that reveal of them pulling the bag off. I think, first of all, I think it looked good. We've seen a lot of de-aging. I do think this one looked good. The banter between him and the Nazis, I think it's like classic. It's like bringing us back in. It's like, did you win the war? I think all that's just very good. And you guys also had mentioned like the action too. And I think it's worth saying, like, one of the disappointments of this movie for me is that it doesn't look like a Spielberg action movie.
Yeah.
But James Mangold also shoots differently, and it's a little more modern. It's more intimate. We don't get the wide sweeping shots typically. We don't get the beautiful vistas that kind of like burn into your brain. But what we do get is a camera like close in to what is happening. And to me, I found that really effective. Maybe not so much on the train sequence, but I thought the horse sequence was really fun because it's a horse like riding through a giant crowd in New York. And first of all, like an older version, 1960s version of New York. I think the subway stuff looked good. Yeah, it's all CG. We know so much of this stuff is CG. But I think it felt convincing enough. Like Indiana Jones riding a horse through the tunnels, dropping the horse, getting on the train. I think the subway is faster. That reminds me of No Ticket. Like there are a lot of those moments
supposed to evoke No Ticket. My favorite line of his in the entire movie is your face rings a bell. That's that's the best line in the whole movie, in my opinion. But as far as your question, Dave, I kept waiting for that opening sequence to do something marvelous, to do something spectacular, and it never does. I thought it was solid in the sense. Exactly what Devindra said, like the banter's fun. All of the oh my God, the Nazis are going to find me out. Oh, they do find him out. They can't, all of that classic indie, wearing the uniform, disguising it, all of that stuff, great. But I kept waiting for there to be a reason we're on this train that's different than any other train sequence I've ever seen in a movie before. Mm-hmm. And it's not. They jump off the thing. I've seen that 1,000 times. There's nothing that happens that was transcendently cool. That was like, oh my gosh, that is an amazing opening sequence to an indie movie. And I think, unfortunately, that's the job, right? That's when Tom Cruise and Christopher McQuarrie set out to make a Mission Impossible movie. They go, what's the thing that no one has seen us do yet? We build the sequence around that. And I think that's kind of the job is, what's that thing that's amazing? And like I said, we don't ever get to that, in my opinion. I mean, there's some fun stuff.
I think the Tuk Tuk Chase is a lot of fun because I love a a really cramped, not fast-paced, but definitely like very like energetic
there's some cool stuff
kind of chase.
That happens there. There's some cool. There's that Jeep sequence where stuff's exploding right in front. There's cool stuff that happens, but it isn't until we're on that plane going through time, having like ancient artillery attack modern planes that I was like, we're in an this is an Indiana Jones movie. This is special, and I just wish there were like 2 or 3 more special things that happened before that weren't character moments, that were like set piece moments.
I do think, on that note, Jeff, with the Mission Impossible comparison, I think this movie compares very unfavorably to Dead Reckoning Part 1.
I haven't seen that yet.
You can see, I'll just say, from the trailer, there are scenes that are similar.
Yeah.
In Dead Reckoning Part 1.
There is a train.
There is a train.
I see the movie on Thursday. Right. I don't know that there's a train. All I know is a motorcycle. So don't talk.
Okay. Apologies. But I'll just say, like, for a lot of that movie, which I have seen, it's like, I believe that that's actually a character doing the thing.
Sure. Right.
And
because it is.
No point in this movie. Yeah, because largely it is. And at this point, in this movie, there was virtually no point at which I was like, I believe that's Harrison Ford actually doing that thing.
Sure.
Again, it wasn't him in any of them, right? He never did any of it. Like, but also, I
actually don't think that's factually true.
I think it's like, mostly true.
There's literally stories of like Last Crusade of like his stunt person saying to him, you have to start letting me do work because like you're in most of these shots. So even if it's not, by the way, even if it's not him, like there's a physical human doing it. And so there's many points where it's like, I don't even know if it's a physical human.
Fair enough. And I understand that's an aesthetic that means a lot to you. And I react to it as well. I also don't think in 20 years, Tom Cruise is going to be doing this stuff. I don't think at 80, Tom Cruise is going to be doing.
And at that point, I will also be complaining. You know what I'm saying? Like, I will be consistent at that point too.
At that point, it would look photorealistic. Like, there's going to be no difference.
It's possible. Let's talk about some of the side characters of this movie.
A lot of bad.
There's just a lot of like weird side characters. So, for instance, like Shawnette Renee Wilson plays a character named Mason.
She's a CIA agent.
Yeah, Boyd Holbrook plays a character named Kleber. It felt like
they're in a different movie.
What happened to those? What
was going on there?
Why were those characters in the situation?
The whole thing why were they in the movie? Like, Mads Mikkelsen's a scientist who used to be a Nazi, helped the space program. Why does he have a bunch of henchmen?
It doesn't make any sense.
And why is the government supporting his henchmen?
My guess is that they actually had backstories for those characters.
Sure.
It made the movie 20 minutes longer.
Yeah.
And then they're like, okay, let's cut all that. But then they can't cut out everything because those characters play critical roles in some of the action scenes early on in the film. That's my guess.
I would have liked to see that character, the Mason character, also stick around longer too.
What a cool look that character has. I just think it would have been. Yeah. It would have been. I'm just like, at the end of the movie, I'm like, what were those people doing? What happened?
Like, I felt the same way about Antonio Banderas because it's like
another character that. Another example.
He comes in. He's basically in the movie for like 10 minutes. It's like my old friend, the best Spanish diver, and I was like, oh, this is who Antonio Banderas is playing. Dead 10 or 15 minutes
also later. That sequence is baffling because I love the they're like eels, they're like sea snakes. No, they're not. I love that. But what else is that sequence? We swim down, they come out, and then we swim away from them. Like interesting about that?
I mean, especially after the whole submarine situation now, I think the idea of deep sea diving, especially into something that he is like totally afraid of, I thought that was like compelling. The whole like, we got 3 minutes. No more than 3
nothing
minutes.
is made
like,
of the 3 minutes. Like none.
Oh, they got to
There's
get out
nothing.
of there. Yeah.
There's nothing cool that happens. That's the problem. Is there's no central. It felt like we wanted to do sea surface eels because we can make the snake joke.
Yeah,
and it's a great joke, but
do more.
There has to be some.
Because they were going. They had to go get the thing that would direct them to the thing. Like it's too many things. Too many things to find and fetch, basically.
Yeah. Very, very video game like, but that's true of a lot of Indiana Jones.
That's all of them.
Yeah.
To be honest,
honestly, video games kind of pull from that more than the other way around.
Fair enough. And then I guess the only other question I have for you guys is, and so just to be clear, like I think my complaint is like Mason, Kleber, Antonio Banderas, diver guy. It's like, there was a question asked of James Mangold, like, hey, did you ever think of getting Ke Huy Quan in the mix? You know, like short round in the mix. And James Mangold said, they probably filmed Everything Everywhere around the same time as Dial of Destiny.
Yeah.
So
this was before his comeback.
Yeah, Ke Huy Quan was not a huge sort of presence in his mind. And he said, honestly, I needed to figure out a way to get fewer adults in the movie.
Yeah.
Like fewer speaking adults. And,
it's true.
And he was fine with, I think Teddy is the name of the kid's name, right?
I like the kid.
Yeah,
the kid is
kind of
good.
cool.
Yeah.
Completely fine. But it's like, there's too many speaking adult roles in this movie for what the movie even can support, and a lot of them are completely unnecessary. What'd you guys think of the tomb at the end? I thought it was like kind of a mixed bag. Yeah, it's fine. That's how I feel. It's fine.
I thought it was cool. I thought that was where the movie started kicking into gear for me. Is like we're revving up into something interesting here. The water.
The kid has to escape.
Yeah, like the puzzle of the water and the thing opening up. That was cool.
That's like a classic Indiana Jones solving a puzzle kind of deal. I like that.
I do kind of wish, like, if this movie were made a year or so later, like I could see a spot for Short Round here and how that would be so honestly, thematically
spot
perfect.
on. Like post him winning the Academy Award, there's no universe where he's not in this movie. It's such a bummer.
Imagine like it was him and Indy going on an adventure together. Like that would have crushed, man. That would have been so good. No complaints about Helena Shaw. As a presence in general, though. Like I think she's completely fine in the movie.
Such a missed opportunity.
She was fun, especially in the chase with like her former fiance.
Yeah,
the guy is just like heartbroken at the same time. It's like, don't shoot her. That's like that. Cool. That's like just fun comedic bits. I do miss from the series.
Some cool stuff there. So and is there anything else in the movie that we want to mention?
Salah's good. Salah's back.
It was great to see him.
Yeah.
I believe, I'm not 100% sure, but I believe he turned down a role in Crystal Skull, like a quick cameo, because it would be like too quick. And so he wanted like a more proper send off, and I do think this is slightly better than what he would have gotten.
I do kind of wonder, like I guess Salah's in Brooklyn's like they're not talking. They're old friends. They went on many adventures together. This is the first time you're seeing Salah's grandkids. What's going on here? There is that. I do want to say there is something that this movie could have tapped into too, is about the idea of U.S. Of the government hiring Nazis to get us to space. Like there is texture there, because Indiana Jones is the Nazi punching character that we all know and love. He still gets to punch Nazis here, but also the U.S. government really needed those Nazis, huh? We really needed, like, we kind of needed them.
Yeah.
So
There, a lot of interesting fertile territory.
Not enough cool whip stuff.
Yeah.
I do like the one scene where he gets to whip it out. That is in the trailer, unfortunately. So that reveal of like everybody pointing the guns at him.
That was like a classic.
It was fun.
That was classic fun. Indiana Jones moment for sure. So it's not like I'm not like the movie was completely redeemable, or there's many things about the movie I like, but it was a very mixed bag for me.
Honestly, it's a mixed bag for me. I was very conflicted. I just liked the ending so much that it kind of retroactively made the whole movie better for me, and I can't defend that. But.
It's a bold swing, man. Like, and there's so many things I liked about it too. Like
better than the aliens in Crystal Skull too. So.
100%. Not even close. But the idea of Archimedes like sending this dial into the future to like
such a great concept.
Please send help. Yeah, it's such an awesome idea. By the way, the little kid's name was Henry, I think. Is that right? Did I get that right?
Teddy,
Teddy, sorry. Teddy, apologies. what was the point of Teddy having a pilot in his plane with him?
So we could.
I think it was more like this kid can get the plane off the ground, but we're not going to expect this kid to actually maneuver something and land.
The pilot doesn't do jack shit though. He doesn't take over the controls.
No, he takes over.
Is there a more contrived setup in the history of cinema than literally a scene with him like his fake airplane set up to establish that he can fly a plane? It's like, in what? It's the most forced. Like, this kid loves to pretend he can fly planes.
I mean, we are months away from the Gran Turismo movie, and that is basically the same story.
Yeah. We are decades away from Microsoft Flight Simulator being a thing, unfortunately.
That's true.
But yeah, that was. It was just there's just all these little things in the movie of like, why is there a pilot there? It generates a little bit of tension. Like I was like, oh, interesting, a little pilot, but then nothing comes in. So it's just
the pilot does take over. I do recall him because they're stuck like to land the plane.
I'm pretty sure I remember him landing the plane though.
He's
but maybe
still in the front, but the pilot was next to him. I believe he took it over,
maybe he landed the plane. I don't know, but okay.
There's only so much we can believe here. The kid can get the plane off the ground, but I've played Pilot Wings. Landing is hard.
I don't know, man. I'm going to go rewatch the movie. I don't know if the pilot lands the plane. I'm going to have to go check. Actually, you know what? If you've seen the movie recently, did the pilot help in any way to land the plane, or was he completely unnecessary? /filmcast@gmail.com.
I'm pretty sure he sat down next to him and grabbed something. So
okay,
that's what I recall.
For me, the biggest issue that we've uncovered here today is that Devindra somehow thinks there's any problem at all with Last Crusade, which I believe is a near perfect movie.
I think those movies are close to many of our hearts, but for me, it's Raiders.
I mean,
it's like
I think Raiders is near perfect too, but I don't know.
I like Last Crusade just fine. It just feels more cartoonish.
Last Crusade, in my opinion, has one flaw that may stand in for some of the bigger issues, which is it makes Marcus Brody into a laughingstock. And Marcus Brody in the first movie, he's like a very dignified, respectful character, and he's kind of like just a goof off comic relief in the third film.
Like Last Crusade. Like I would happily rewatch Last Crusade. Temple of Doom is a movie where I'm like, I really like certain parts of Temple of Doom. I really like the opening, and then
I agree. Temple of Doom for me is the low point of the first three, but I think Last Crusade is an almost impeccable sequel.
Interesting. Okay, so let's just close in on our rankings here, guys. It sounds like probably all of us would put Raiders at first.
Yeah.
Probably all of us would put Crusade second place, right? Then for me, it would be Temple of Doom, Dial of Destiny, and Kingdom.
That's my exact ranking too. Yeah.
Yep. So despite all of our heated disagreements, at the end of the day, not only
I would put Dial of Destiny before Temple. So that's just
okay.
I don't think I would.
All right, It's slightly less racist than Temple, so that's
it is slightly less racist, but also
I will agree.
I did have to go through school with a lot of like racism. So
fair enough. All right, well, at the end of the day, it's impressive that despite all of our heated agreements, we still would rank all the Indiana Jones movies roughly the same. And at the end of the day, it's still impressive that James Mangold made a movie. Thank you so much for watching this video of the Filmcast. Check out these other videos that we have available, and be sure to hit like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon to get other videos from us in the future.
You can also go to thefilmcast.com to catch all of our audio podcast versions of all of our episodes.
And support this podcast at patreon.com/filmpodcast, where you can sign up for ad-free episodes and exclusive After Darks.
Thanks so much to everyone who makes the Filmcast possible.